Several minutes passed, and as Bailey Chongqing stole a glance at Zhang Yi and his team, he wondered what the group could possibly be chatting about to take this long. But what he was most concerned was if Wu Di was confident in defeating Zhang Yi in this duel. He pulled Wu Di aside, and with a slight frown he asked worriedly, "Xiao Wu, Zhang Yi is now stronger than before. He can even withstand Yuan Kongya's attack when no one could. Can you really beat him?" Wu Di had changed into a pure white and black tight leather combat outfit with a noticeable button on his wrist. When Wu Di heard the question, his eyes began to shimmer with a burning desire, and his previous arrogance was no longer evident. "I understand your worry, Captain, but I have already figured out Zhang Yi's ability in the battle with Yuan Kongya." Wu Di's eyes continued to burn with insatiable desire. Zhang Yi's ability is based predominantly on incredible defense, not offense. And if Yuan Kongya's combat experience was not too lacking, she would not have been defeated so easily. When Captain Bien was alive, he always warned me that the strength of ability cannot determine everything. The key to victory is to rely on this. He pointed to his head. "I have thought of a way to beat him." As Wu Di said this, a smug smile crept at the corner of his lips. "This time, at the very least, I must beat him, even when it's just this one time. Otherwise, I will never accept it in this lifetime." What Wu Di most wanted was the recognition of Bien Junwu. And it didn't matter if Bien Junwu was dead, because as long as he defeated Zhang Yi, who was highly praised by his mentor, Bien Junwu, he would be satisfied. Moreover, he knew that Zhang Yi would not exert his full strength here. In any case, it was enough for them to fight on equal levels, and he was going to win. In Wu Di's opinion, this move he managed to pull off was not shameless. After all, with the right time, the right place, and the right people, those who were good at taking advantage of these things had excellent judgment and were also amazing fighters. Bailey Chongqing could do nothing but sigh helplessly and heavily. He knew from Wu Di's expression that there was really nothing in the world that could stop him. "I hope so," he murmured. Bailey Chongqing also felt that Wu Di's analysis made sense. Fighting with a man like Zhang Yi who has max defense, as long as you are not particularly stubborn and consume him, there will not be too much danger. Of course, this premise is heavily based on the fact that Zhang Yi does not use his extremely lethal space-killing skills. Seeing his sudden expression, Wu Di, again, reassured him not to worry. He'd got this. "Oh, and speaking of Zhang Yi, are they not done?" Bailey Chongqing turned around to find Zhang Yi. He had to give him a few words and help him change his clothes. He should also do some warm-up exercises first. Bailey Chongqing called out to Zhang Yi with an expressionless face. "It's almost time, so let's go. I'll take you to change clothes first. I also recommend you to do some warm-up exercises before the duel." Hearing this, Zhang Yi asked with a smile if he really needed to change clothes just for a duel. "Of course," Bailey Chongqing, in a serious tone, said earnestly. "When dueling in the martial arts arena, you need to wear special training clothes to protect your body from harm." As soon as Bailey Chongqing's voice fell, Zhang Yi saw Wu Di, wearing a black and white tights at a distance not far away. Zhang Yi immediately agreed when he spotted Wu Di's outfit. "Okay, let's go." Soon, Zhang Yi, accompanied by Bailey Chongqing, entered the locker room. There were grids on the cabinets by the wall. Bailey Chongqing walked over, placed a finger on a fingerprint identification button on a cabinet. Seconds after, the identification was successfully confirmed, and inside the cabinet was a set of training outfit identical to Wu Di's. He took it out with his authority, and then handed it to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi took the training clothes and first carefully inspected it to see if there were any special devices. The feeling of this special set of clothes was very strange. It was much heavier than ordinary tights and much thicker than ordinary fabrics. It was obvious at this point that the outfit was made of some special high-tech materials. Zhang Yi then heads inside a cubicle for changing clothes. He knew that the moment he wears the outfit, his personal data will probably be recorded. Fortunately, he was not a strengthening mutant, so it was harmless to just collect his physical data. Donning them on, Zhang Yi's eyes flashed with eerie brilliance as he checked his new appearance. He did not feel any discomfort. And as for whether his supernatural data would be collected, he figured he couldn't hide his usual health, strength, and any other common attributes any longer. After all, his basic abilities and attributes must be counted in the Jiangnan district. Anyway, his only secret and trump card was the new fighting methods he awakened after absorbing the origins of Yuan Kongya, and that can be hidden without any difficulty. This suit was very interesting. It had no zipper or anything like that. Instead, after putting it on, all you needed to do was to press a button on your right hand, and the tights will automatically fit tightly on your body. Immediately upon pressing the button, Zhang Yi was completely stunned. He moved his body and actually had a strange feeling. His body seemed to become more flexible and his strength became stronger. This kind of training suit actually has such an effect. Zhang Yi commented in wonder as he came out of the cubicle. Bailey Chongqing, who was patiently waiting outside, gave an approving smile when Zhang Yi expressed his doubts. The training suit is actually made with the same material as our investigation team's uniforms, which can significantly improve our overall quality and attributes. We usually wear a set of built-in uniforms when we go out on missions. It's no exaggeration to say that even an ordinary person wearing it can achieve the most basic alpha-level enhanced mutant physical fitness. Zhang Yi looked at the training suit on his body in surprise, then back at Bailey Chongqing with a smile. There are such magical clothes? With his arms leisurely folded, Bailey Chongqing saw Zhang Yi's envy and reminded him that this kind of training suit was very precious. In Blizzard City, only the Yenyun troops and the 6 major investigation teams were qualified to use it. If Zhang Yi likes and wants it, he can consider joining his Black Robe team. Zhang Yi curled his lips slightly. He knew where this conversation was heading, and it was better to avoid it. Let's forget about this, shall we? Bailey Chongqing shrugged and led Zhang Yi outside the locker room. He knew that Zhang Yi didn't like being constrained, so any effort would be pointless. Alright, let's go to the martial arts arena. When the two came out, Wu Di was already waiting for Zhang Yi's arrival in the center of the martial arts arena. He folded his arms, already adjusted himself to the best condition. Zhang Yi, remember, stop when you are done. Bailey Chongqing did not forget to remind Zhang Yi. He was very worried that Zhang Yi would get too excited and accidentally use his divine power. That attack would probably kill Wu Di in one blow. Bailey Chongqing, who had a high defense than Wu Di, could not guarantee that he could survive after taking that move. Left alone Wu Di. Zhang Yi told Bailey Chongqing not to worry, he hasn't forgotten. Anyway, I'll hand over my satellite phone to my teammate for safekeeping. His satellite phone, which contained his personal secrets, wasn't something he would leave in the locker room. Bailey Chongqing knew that Zhang Yi did not trust the safekeeping mechanism in Blizzard City, so he could only smile and replied that it was fine. After all, this was a normal thing to do for someone as extremely cautious as him. Zhang Yi smiled and casually replied that it was better to be safe than sorry. Details determine success or failure. His words were a double entendre, and Bailey Chongqing did not realize the deep meaning of his words. Zhang Yi walked up to the others and handed the satellite phone to Lu Karen. Karen, he whispered, please keep this thing for me. Zhang Yi turned his gaze to his wrist, then back at Lu Karen with a weird look. Lu Karen understood and reached out to touch the training suit on Zhang Yi's arm. Zhang Yi chatted with her for a few words, delaying for a while. After Lu Karen finished analyzing the material structure of the training suit, Zhang Yi turned around and walked towards the martial arts arena, as Lu Karen shouts loudly from behind, "Go on, big brother. I know you will win." Seconds after that, Bailey Chongqing walked up to the group and told them that they would be watching the battle on the second floor. The second floor was relatively safe compared to the first. The entire martial arts arena was about a quarter the size of a football field, and its shape was similar to that of a football field or the ancient Roman Colosseum. The outer area was a dozen-story building, and the battle scene in the field can be clearly seen. Zhang Yi stood dozens of meters away from Wu Di. He looked at the surrounding space and frowned slightly. This place seems a little small, and there is not much room for maneuver. A battle between high-level mutants will cause large-scale destruction at any time, and this small space was obviously not enough. Hearing this, Wu Di replied lightly with a smile. "Oh, you don't have to worry about this." Then, he suddenly snapped his fingers, and before Zhang Yi could realize what had just happened, the entire scene in front of him were pulled away in an instant. Wu Di, who was originally dozens of meters away from him, was suddenly hundreds of meters away. The entire experience felt like a magic show, and the martial arts field, which was about a quarter of the size of a football field, has become more than 10 square kilometers. Zhang Yi was deeply startled, but he finally understood seconds after. "Is this a space ability?" he asked as he turned his head from side to side. This is the first time he has seen a space ability being used other than his own. At this moment, it wasn't the arena that had suddenly become larger, but the entire building had undergone a weird change. On the second floor viewing platform, the scene in front of Lu Karen, Zhokir, and the others had also become vast. However, rather than saying that the scene has become larger, it is better to say that everything in front of them had shrunk. Wait, how come the martial arts arena had suddenly become bigger? Zhokir questioned in astonishment. Bailey Chongqing explained to them, "This is the ability of the martial arts field administrator. Its actual name is the martial arts field, and it's a very functional spatial ability." A mechanical and emotionless voice sounded in the ears of Zhang Yi and Wu Di to ready themselves for the duel. On the other hand, No one noticed at that very moment that there were actually other spectators at the scene besides Bailey Chongqing and the others. You see, the use of the martial arts field was very high, and only members of the investigation team and the Yenyun troops were qualified. Nevertheless, the level of battle that happens on it were not often in the entire Blizzard City. So, when the martial arts field was applied for activation, it naturally attracted many people to watch the battle. And one of these people was Deng Shintong, the captain of the God team, who was on the 3rd floor at that very moment. He was watching the battle upstairs, looking at the two on the martial art field with interest. He was more or less curious about Zhang Yi. If he can really beat Wu Di, then it is not impossible to give him a chance to become a substitute for the God team. Deng Shintong had his arms leisurely folded and with his eyes narrowed, a playful smile crept on his lips. Behind him were two members of his team, a short-haired strong man with a beard and a feminine man in black. Several members of the Black Robe team also arrived and watched the scene below from the background. It was rare to have such a battle, so of course they would not miss it. But among these spectators, the most impressive one was Commander Zhu Zhang of the Jiangnan region, who was currently in the exclusive VIP room on the 5th floor. The entire room was well furnished, and Zhu Zhang was sitting on a sofa with his arms and legs leisurely crossed. On the sofa to his left sat Tu Yunlai, the Minister of Operations. And behind them was two Yunyan guards and Zhu Zheng's secretary, Lan Xinqing. Can be said that at least half of the bigwigs in the entire Blizzard City was there. It is indeed unusual that a simple duel can attract the attention of so many people. A glass in front of them turned into a huge screen, which had zoomed in on the martial art field, observing the two people in the field from a perfect angle. The mechanical and emotionless voice, once again, sounded in the ears of Zhang Yi and Wu Di, and the battle immediately begun. The distance between the two sides was hundreds of meters, but since both of them were long-range attack types, this distance seemed to not be an issue. Zhang Yi took out two white owls with both hands, aimed at Wu Di and pulled the trigger. With his precision shooting activated, the bullets automatically locked on Wu Di's position. Zhang Yi was mindful not to use the holy silver bullet that were deadly to mutants, but a special armor-piercing bullet with similar design, developed by Liu Karen. Using the holy silver bullet in Blizzard City would easily make people suspect that it was a replica of the origin bullet. Zhang Yi would not make such a rookie mistake. But even if it was an armor-piercing bullet, it also had extremely powerful lethality under his supernatural power. In an instant, the two fired bullets was a few meters from the locked-in target, who stood there, currently motionless. Then, hundreds of white light balls appeared around Wu Di's body, covering him up. When the bullets approached the white light balls around him, they were directly melted in the air. This scene was expected, and Deng Shintong nodded slightly. This kid has a very good talent and ability. Wu Di's talent was very high. Even Bian Junwu was very optimistic about the floating cannon that converts mental power into energy. After the battle in Tianhai City, it was obvious that his combat effectiveness has been raised to a higher level. Zhang Yi was unmoved. Wu Di knew his ability and would definitely be wary of his incredible skills with guns. It would be strange if Wu Di could not defend himself. But so what? Zhang Yi knew everything depended on whether he had more bullets or Wu Di had more mental strength. Zhang Yi kept pulling the trigger with both hands, slowly moving his position while shooting at Wu Di. All the bullets were fired at the same position, trying to break through the defense area of the floating gun. It's useless. I already know your attack methods and patterns. It's impossible to hurt me with these predictable attack method. Wu Di stretched out his right hand, and more than a dozen light balls condensed into a huge floating gun, which blasted towards Zhang Yi fiercely. In an instant, a white beam of light penetrated the space and came to Zhang Yi, but the beam of light suddenly disappeared in midair. Same as always, Zhang Yi had already opened his dimensional door at the beginning of the battle, and Wu Di knew of this, but he also kept using a predictable attack. Zhang Yi smiled with a knowing look because it was obvious at this point that he too knew Wu Di's ability and attack methods. At this time, the two of them were competing in trump cards and the ability to counter moves. The ability of the space system can absorb attacks, right? Deng Shintong was genuinely interested to the point that he couldn't take his eyes off Zhang Yi and the battle for a second. However, with his arms folded in a relaxed manner, he continued curiously with a smile. I wonder if his absorption is infinite. If it is, can it take my attacks? Hearing Deng Shintong's question, the bearded man beside him suddenly spoke up. Space-related abilities rarely have powerful attack methods. However, I am very interested in sparring with him. Right on cue, the feminine man smiled faintly upon hearing this and also shared his thoughts. There are only a few people with the ability of the space system like you who are close combat type. If you fight him, isn't that just bullying? The bearded man laughed loudly. That's right. It was indeed bullying for him to fight with Zhang Yi, a mutant outside Blizzard City. Because he was the deputy captain of the God Squad, the God Fist Liao Honglei. Deng Shentong lazily said that it doesn't matter. All he needed was Zhang Yi's ability to store items. This will make it much easier for our team to carry out missions in the future. However, if he can give me a little surprise from his space system, it will be even more interesting. Deng Shentong looked at Zhang Yi on the martial arts field with a slightly expectant look in his eyes. In the first wave of attempts, neither Zhang Yi nor Wu Di's assaults could do anything to the other. But the two continued with their attacks anyway. Only by continuing to attack can the other party be forced to reveal flaws. Zhang Yi had used up all the bullets in both pistols. Then he immediately pressed the button on the gun handle, and the empty magazine fell off. Suddenly, 2 full magazines appeared out of thin air. However, they appeared precisely from beneath the 2 guns and inserted directly with enough force. The entire scene felt like witnessing a magic trick. Accompanied with a resounding and continuous bang, Zhang Yi's shooting never stopped. Even if he was a mutant, he couldn't remain indifferent to such an attack. Wu Di's aperture defense was really powerful, and no bullets were allowed to get close to him. But for Zhang Yi, it didn't matter. As long as he could consume Wu Di's self-proclaimed invincible superpower, it was enough. Even a little bit was valuable. Wu Di stared at Zhang Yi, not daring to be careless. He knew that Zhang Yi was good at defense and not very good at attack. But Zhang Yi had his divine power, which could directly hit him hard. However, this skill was not an option in this duel, and its lethality was almost impossible to avoid. After Wu Di came back to Blizzard City, he studied Zhang Yi's information carefully, and found out that before Zhang Yi used his divine power, there would be an obvious skill pre-swing, and the distortion of space was not in place in one step. Moreover, the divine power extremely consumed his superpowers. After releasing it, Zhang Yi's body would be in a state of short-term superpower emptiness, and he would not be able to use his divine power for the second time immediately after. This observation was greatly flawed, of course, but only Zhang Yi's team knew of this. Wu Di thought that as long as he stayed alert and avoided the attack in time, he could take advantage of Zhang Yi's attack gap to counterattack. Obviously, this is based on the premise that Zhang Yi decides to use that skill. Wu Di didn't trust Zhang Yi not to, so he thought of a way to survive that skill. Wu Di sneered and spread his hands. "Look at this move of mine. It's specially prepared for you." At this moment, droplets of light slowly appeared around his arms, densely packed. There were thousands of them. This is a small floating cannon. Although it is not as powerful as the previous light ball, it is more numerous and difficult to defend. Then he waved his hands towards Zhang Yi, and the thousands of light spots instantly broke through the space and shot towards Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi was not in a hurry and opened his dimensional gate to block the numerous light balls in front of him. However, those light spots did not directly sink into the dimensional gate, but suddenly scattered in the air and flew in all directions around Zhang Yi. Seeing this, Zhang Yi smiled, not the least bit bothered. "Nice! Is this going to launch an area of effect attack on me?" Zhang Yi immediately understood Wu Di's intention. Wu Di's mouth curled up with a knowing smile. "Captain Bien once said that your ability can restrain my floating cannon. But this kind of attack from all directions without dead ends, how can you defend?" Thousands of light spots were suspended in the air, covering the so-called directions around Zhang Yi. In Zhang Yi's sharp eyes, they became brighter and hotter. Then, there was a series of amazing explosions. With a deafening boom, thousands of micro-floating cannons exploded around Zhang Yi, and the bright light illuminated the entire space, causing dazzling light that was almost blinding.